For 3,000 years, the Galactic Confederation had one unshakable belief. Humans were extinct. The records were clear, the evidence undeniable. Earth had been glassed by the Zephyrian Empire in the Great Purge. Every human settlement burned to cosmic dust, every ship hunted down and destroyed. The galaxy had moved on, dividing human territories among the victors, treating humanity as nothing more than a cautionary tale told to young species about the price of defiance. But on the edge of the Kepler Nebula, where even the most advanced sensors struggled to penetrate the electromagnetic storms, something impossible happened. A ship appeared, not emerged from hyperspace, not dropped out of warp, simply appeared, as if the very fabric of reality had been peeled back like a curtain. The vessel was unlike anything in the galactic databases. Sleek where other ships were bulky, elegant where others were utilitarian, and radiating an energy signature that made every alien admiral's blood run cold. Because buried deep in their oldest military files, in classified sections marked with warnings their great-grandparents had written, were readings that matched this impossible ghost. It was a human signature, and it was broadcasting on all frequencies a message that would shatter 3 millennia of comfortable lies. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the Terran Expeditionary Force. We've been watching. We've been waiting. And now, it's time you remembered what you thought you'd destroyed. The galaxy was about to learn that reports of humanity's death had been greatly exaggerated, and the cost of their pride would be measured in ways they couldn't yet imagine. Admiral Kethvar of the Galactic Confederation Navy stared at the sensor readout with all 4 of his eyes, certain that his aging Vrathri physiology was finally playing tricks on him. The massive command bridge of the Sovereigns will hummed with the nervous energy of 300 crew members who had just witnessed something that should have been impossible. "Run the scan again," he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of 40 years in service. "Full spectrum analysis. I want every sensor array we have focused on that contact." Lieutenant Zura, a young Pelian with the characteristic blue-tinted skin of her species, worked frantically at her station. Her 6-fingered hands danced across holographic controls with practiced precision. "Sir, I've run it 7 times. The signature is consistent across all readings. Energy patterns match archived Terran vessel configurations with 97% accuracy." The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. Admiral Kethvar had been a junior officer during the final years of the human war, barely old enough to serve on a communications vessel far from the front lines. But he remembered the fear in his superiors' voices when they spoke of human tactical innovations, their unpredictable strategies, their refusal to surrender even when facing impossible odds. "That's impossible," whispered Commander Thex from the tactical station. The massive Krillian's rocky exterior trembled slightly. The humans were wiped out 3,000 years ago. Every ship destroyed, every colony burned. The Zephyrians made sure of it. Admiral Kethvar turned his attention back to the main view screen. The vessel hung in space like a predator waiting to strike. Its hull was a deep charcoal gray that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Smooth curves replaced the angular designs favored by most galactic species, giving it an almost organic appearance. Most unsettling were the energy readings. The ship was clearly powered by technology far beyond anything in current Confederation databases. "Size estimate," Kethvar asked. "Approximately 2 kilometers in length," Zara reported. "But, sir, the mass readings are inconsistent with the visual size. Either their hull materials are incredibly dense, or—" She paused, checking her readings again. "Or there's more ship than we're seeing." The communication array suddenly crackled to life. A clear, unaccented voice filled the bridge, speaking in perfect galactic standard, a language that hadn't existed during the time of the human war. "Confederation vessel Sovereign's will. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the Terran Expeditionary Force ship Defiance. Request permission to establish diplomatic contact." The words hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. Several officers took involuntary steps backward. Admiral Kethvar felt his primary heart skip a beat, while his secondary heart compensated with rapid pumps. How do they know our ship's name? Fex rumbled. We haven't transmitted any identification. Kethvar raised a hand for silence. 3,000 years of military protocol warred with curiosity and a deep, primal fear that had been bred into his species through generations of stories about human warfare. He activated the comm system with a trembling finger. This is Admiral Kethvar of the Galactic Confederation Navy. Your species was declared extinct by Galactic census 3 millennia ago. Identify yourself properly and explain your presence in Confederation space. A pause. Then, what sounded distinctly like laughter came through the speakers. Not mocking or cruel, but genuinely amused. Admiral, with respect, we've been in what you call Confederation space for quite some time now. We've been observing your activities for the past 73 years. As for our extinction, I'm afraid those reports were strategically convenient for all parties involved. The main view screen shimmered and resolved into the image of a human female. She appeared to be in her 40s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical style and brown eyes that held an intelligence that made Kethvar distinctly uncomfortable. She wore a uniform of deep blue with silver trim, bearing insignia that meant nothing to the Confederation databases, but somehow conveyed unmistakable authority. Captain Shun, Kethvar said carefully, if your people survive the Zephyrian Purge, why reveal yourselves now? Why maintain the deception for so long? Sarah Chun leaned back in her command chair, and the camera angle widened to show a bridge that was a study in efficiency and advanced technology. Holographic displays floated in midair, operated by crew members whose hands moved through light as if it were solid matter. The very air seemed to shimmer with energy. Because, Admiral, we needed time to prepare. The galaxy that destroyed our colonies, hunted our ships, and tried to wipe us from existence needed to be evaluated. We've spent 3,000 years watching, learning, and deciding whether the species that committed genocide against us have learned anything from their actions. Kethvar felt his stomach drop. And what conclusion did you reach? That's what we're here to discuss. Chun gestured to someone off-screen, and new information began appearing on the Confederation ship's displays. Star charts showing human settlements in regions supposedly empty of intelligent life. Fleet compositions that dwarfed the combined navies of the major galactic powers. Resource extraction operations on a scale that boggled the mind. You see, Admiral, while the galaxy congratulated itself on removing the human threat, we were rebuilding. Not just our ships or our worlds, but our entire approach to existence in a universe that clearly viewed us as an unwelcome intrusion. Lieutenant Zara's voice was barely above a whisper. Sir, I'm reading massive gravitational distortions throughout the system. Whatever cloaking technology they're using, I think there are more ships out there. A lot more ships. Captain Chin nodded as if she had heard the young officer's report. Your lieutenant is quite observant. Yes, Admiral, you're not just speaking to one ship. You're addressing the advanced scout of the Terran Expeditionary Force. Behind me are vessels carrying the representatives of humanity's new government, our military leadership, and, most importantly, our historians who have compiled quite detailed records of exactly what the galaxy did to us. The Admiral found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. What do you want? Initially, we wanted to remain hidden forever, to build our civilization in the dark spaces between stars, and leave the galaxy to its own devices. But recent events have convinced us that isolation is no longer an option. Chen's expression grew serious. Admiral, are you familiar with the recent Zephyrian expansion into the Outer Rim territories? Their new policies regarding inferior species and genetic purification? Kethvar's blood chilled. The Zephyrian Empire had indeed been growing more aggressive in recent decades, implementing policies that echoed their ancient campaigns against humanity. Several minor species had already been relocated from their homeworlds. We're aware of their activities, he said carefully. Then, you're aware that they're preparing to do to 6 other species what they did to us. The Altarians, the Vegan Collective, the Tausetians, and 3 others whose only crime is possessing resources the Zephyrians want. Chun leaned forward. We've decided that we won't let that happen again. So you're revealing yourselves to stop them? Kethvar asked. We're revealing ourselves to give the galaxy a choice, Chun corrected. For 3,000 years, you've all lived with the comfortable lie that the human problem was solved. That genocide was an acceptable solution to inconvenient neighbors. You've built your entire galactic order on the foundation of that lie. The view screen split, showing not just Captain Chun, but a broader view of space around the Defiance. Slowly, like lights coming on in a darkened city, more ships began appearing. First dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of vessels of various sizes, all bearing the same impossible energy signatures. The choice is simple, Chun continued. Help us prevent the Zephyrians from committing another genocide, and we can discuss terms for humanity's return to galactic civilization. Refuse, or worse, side with the Zephyrians. She paused, and every weapon system on every visible human ship suddenly powered up, creating a light show that turned space itself into a constellation of barely contained destruction. And you'll discover that we've had 3,000 years to perfect the art of war. Admiral Kethvar stared at the display, counting ship signatures until his mind could no longer process the numbers. This wasn't a diplomatic mission or a request for aid. This was humanity announcing that they had returned stronger than ever, with a memory for injustice and the power to act on it. Admiral, Chen's voice cut through his stunned silence. I'm transmitting coordinates for a meeting site in the Centauri neutral zone. You have 72 hours to contact the Confederation Council and arrange for proper diplomatic representation. We have a lot to discuss and not much time to do it. The transmission cut off, and the human fleet began to fade back into whatever impossible concealment had hidden them for 73 years. Within moments, space appeared empty again except for the Confederation vessel, alone with readings that proved something unprecedented had just occurred. Sir, Zara said quietly, what do we tell the Council? Admiral Kethvar stared at the empty space where a moment before the largest military fleet in galactic history had been assembled. We tell them the truth, Lieutenant. We tell them that humanity has returned, and they're not the same species we tried to destroy. He turned to his communications officer. Send an emergency transmission to Confederation Command. Priority Alpha clearance. Message reads, contact with previously extinct human civilization confirmed. Military capabilities far exceed current galactic standards. Diplomatic meeting requested in 72 hours. Recommend immediate council emergency session and full military alert status. As the message raced across hyperspace toward the galactic capital, Admiral Kethvar couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy was about to change in ways none of them were prepared for. The humans were back, and they had not forgotten what had been done to them. The cost of galactic pride was about to come due, with interest compounded over 3 millennia of comfortable lies. The emergency session of the Galactic Confederation Council had been called within 6 hours of Admiral Kethvar's transmission. But for High Chancellor Mirataith, those 6 hours had felt like 6 lifetimes. She stood at the center of the great assembly chamber, her elongated cerulean frame casting multiple shadows under the harsh emergency lighting. Around her, representatives from 47 species filled the tiered seating in a cacophony of anxious voices, translated into a dozen different communication methods. Order. I will have order in this chamber. Mirataith's voice, amplified by the chamber's acoustic systems, cut through the chaos. Her species' natural authority, evolved from millions of years as apex predators on their homeworld, finally quieted the assembly. We are here to address a situation that defies our fundamental understanding of galactic history. She activated the central holographic display, which showed Admiral Kethvar's encounter with the human vessel. The recording had been analyzed by every intelligence agency in Confederation space, and the conclusions were universally disturbing. As you can see, We are dealing with a species that possesses technology far beyond our current capabilities, claims to have been observing us for decades, and has military assets that our analysts estimate could challenge the combined fleets of all member species. Ambassador Velkoth of the Zephyrian Empire stood with the fluid motion of his serpentine species. His silver scales caught the light as he spoke, voice dripping with the confidence that had made his people the dominant military power for 3 millennia. High Chancellor, with respect, we are dealing with imposters, or perhaps the descendants of scattered human refugees who have developed delusions of grandeur. The human extinction was thoroughly documented. My ancestors' fleets personally verified the destruction of every human world, every ship, every orbital station. Murmurs of agreement came from several delegations, particularly those whose species had benefited from the redistribution of human territories. But not all voices were supportive. Perhaps that thoroughness was not as complete as your ancestors believed, came a sharp voice from the Altarian delegation. Ambassador Lisa R.A. stood with barely contained fury, her people's crystalline physiology reflecting the chamber's lights in agitated patterns. Given that my people are currently experiencing the same thorough attention from Zephyrian expansion fleets, the chamber erupted again. The Altarian situation had been a source of growing tension for months, with Zephyrian forces systematically occupying Altarian mining worlds under the pretense of resource optimization. It was exactly the kind of aggressive expansion that had preceded the human war. The Altarian situation is entirely different, Velkoth replied smoothly. We are providing necessary guidance to a species that has proven incapable of efficiently managing their own resources. It's a humanitarian intervention. The same humanitarian intervention you provided to humanity? Lisa Ray shot back. Before Velkoth could respond, the chamber's communication array activated with an incoming priority transmission. The main display shifted to show a familiar face, Captain Sarah Chun, appearing calm and collected despite addressing the combined leadership of galactic civilization. High Chancellor, honored representatives, Chun began, I apologize for the interruption, but we've been monitoring your emergency session. Given the questions being raised about our legitimacy, we thought it appropriate to provide some clarification. Mirataith found her voice. Captain Chun, this is a closed session of the Galactic Council. How are you accessing our communications? Chun's expression didn't change. The same way we've been accessing your communications for the past 73 years, High Chancellor. Your security protocols were designed to keep out known threats. We've made sure to remain unknown. She gestured, and the display around her shifted to show what appeared to be a vast command center. Dozens of humans worked at stations showing real-time intelligence from across galactic space. Star maps, fleet movements, diplomatic communications, economic data. Everything flowing in streams of information that painted a picture of total surveillance. To answer Ambassador Velkoth's question about thoroughness, Chun continued, your ancestors' fleets did indeed verify the destruction of every human world they could find. The key phrase being they could find. What they missed were the evacuation fleets that had departed Earth months before the attack, carrying not just refugees, but our entire industrial infrastructure, our scientific databases, and, most importantly, our archived records of every diplomatic and military interaction we'd had with galactic civilization. The implications hit the chamber like a shock wave. If humans had evacuated in advance of the attack, it meant they had known it was coming. It meant the war hadn't ended with human destruction, but with human strategic withdrawal. Impossible, Velkoth said. Our intelligence services would have detected such massive movements. Your intelligence services detected exactly what we wanted them to detect, Chun replied calmly. Tell me, Ambassador, what do you know about the humans who served in your own intelligence apparatus? The translators, the cultural liaisons, the technical specialists who help your fleets navigate human space. The color drained from Velkoth's scales. During the war, the Zephyrian Empire had indeed employed human defectors and collaborators, using their insider knowledge to hunt down resistant cells and hidden bases. Those humans were loyal servants of the Empire, Velkoth said, but His voice had lost its earlier confidence. Those humans were agents of the Terran Strategic Intelligence Division, Chun corrected. Every piece of information they provided was carefully crafted to lead your fleets away from our evacuation routes, while simultaneously mapping your entire command structure, military protocols, and strategic weaknesses. She paused to let that sink in before continuing. For 3,000 years, you believed you won the human war through superior force and tactical brilliance. In reality, you fought a carefully orchestrated retreat designed to let us escape while making you believe you'd achieved total victory. The chamber was completely silent now. The political implications were staggering. If humanity had been manipulating galactic intelligence services for millennia, if they had been observing and recording everything, then every secret diplomatic deal, every military strategy, every species' internal conflicts and weaknesses were known to them. "What do you want?" Mirataith asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Initially, we wanted nothing more than to be left alone to rebuild our civilization in peace," Chen replied. "We found suitable worlds in the galactic rim regions, beyond your sensor networks and exploration routes. We've been quite content to develop our technology, expand our population, and create a society that learned from the mistakes that led to our original exile." The display shifted again, showing images of human worlds that defied belief. Cities that floated in clouds of exotic matter, orbital rings that harvested energy directly from stars, ships the size of moons that served as mobile habitats for millions. This wasn't just survival. This was a civilization that had transcended every technological barrier known to galactic science. But recent events have forced us to reconsider our isolation policy, Chun continued. Specifically, the Zephyrian Empire's renewed interest in what they call genetic optimization and resource consolidation. The display now showed classified Zephyrian military documents, planning papers, and communication logs. The evidence was undeniable. The Zephyrian Empire was preparing for another systematic campaign of conquest and extermination, targeting 6 species whose homeworlds contained resources needed for the Empire's expansion. We've spent 3,000 years watching the galaxy struggle with the question of whether genocide can ever be justified, Chen said. We've watched species rise and fall, observed countless conflicts and diplomatic solutions. And we've reached a conclusion. The galaxy learned nothing from what happened to us. Ambassador Velkoth stood again, his movements more agitated now. The Empire's expansion is legal under galactic law. These species have proven incapable of properly developing their resources. It's not genocide, it's optimization. That's exactly what your ancestors said about us, Chen replied. Word for word in some cases. We have the recordings. She gestured, and audio began playing from ancient Zephyrian government sessions. The voices of long-dead Imperial officials discussing the human problem with the same cold efficiency that current officials discuss the Altarian situation. The parallels were exact, down to the terminology and legal justifications. This is what convinced us to break our isolation, Chen explained. We realized that by disappearing, we didn't solve the problem of galactic genocide. We simply allowed it to continue without the inconvenience of an effective resistance. The display shifted one final time, showing the human fleet that had appeared around the Sovereign's will. But now the numbers were visible. Thousands of ships, each one representing technology that outclassed anything in the galactic databases. So here's what's going to happen, Chen continued, her voice taking on a harder edge. The Zephyrian expansion into Altarian space will cease immediately. All occupied worlds will be returned to Altarian control within 30 days. Similar restoration orders apply to the other 5 species currently targeted for optimization. And if we refuse, Velkoth demanded. Chun smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Ambassador, you've had 3,000 years to build your fleets, develop your weapons, and perfect your strategies. We've had 3,000 years to study every aspect of how you fight, how you think, and how you can be defeated. If you refuse, will demonstrate the difference between evolution and revolution. She stood from her command chair, and the camera followed her movement. Behind her, the command center buzzed with activity as hundreds of humans coordinated operations across galactic space. High Chancellor, you have 48 hours to present a formal response to our requirements. The meeting location remains the Centauri neutral zone. I suggest you bring representatives from all affected species, as well as historians who can verify the records we'll be presenting about galactic treatment of inconvenient civilizations. The transmission began to fade, but Chen's voice remained clear. Oh, and Ambassador Velkoth? You might want to contact your military commanders. They're about to discover that their secure communication networks aren't as secure as they thought. We've been listening to their private channels for decades. The display went dark, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Around the tiered seating, representatives stared at each other with a mixture of fear, anger, and disbelief. The comfortable order they had known for 3 millennia had just been shattered by a species they thought was safely extinct. High Chancellor, Lisare said quietly, "Speaking for the Altarian people, we formally request Confederation support in these negotiations. If the humans are offering protection from Zephyrian expansion, we're interested in hearing their terms." The vegan collective seconds that request, came another voice. The Tausetians as well. One by one, the targeted species voiced their support for the human intervention. They had nothing left to lose and everything to gain from challenging the imperial power that threatened their existence. Mirataith looked around the chamber, seeing the fracture lines that had always existed, but had been held in check by the balance of power. That balance was now shattered, and humanity held the decisive advantage. "This session is adjourned," she announced. "All member species will send representatives to the Centauri meeting. We're about to learn whether the galaxy can adapt to a new reality, or whether we're all about to become footnotes in humanity's revenge story." As the representatives filed out in worried clusters, Mirataith couldn't shake the feeling that they had all been living in a house of cards for 3,000 years, and humanity had just revealed they held the blueprints. The Centauri neutral zone had been established 2 centuries earlier as a buffer region where no single species could claim dominance. Its main station, a massive construct of reinforced alloys and diplomatic necessity, had hosted countless negotiations that shaped galactic politics. But never had it felt as charged with tension as it did when the Confederation delegates arrived to find a human ship already docked. The Defiance sat in Docking Bay 7 like a predator at rest. Its dark hull seemed to absorb the station's lighting, creating an area of deeper shadow that made the surrounding alien vessels look crude and primitive by comparison. Station personnel gave the human ship a wide berth, though whether from fear or professional caution was unclear. High Chancellor Mirataith led the Confederation delegation through the station's main corridors, noting the unusual security measures that had been implemented. Force field generators hummed at full power. Sensor arrays swept continuously for weapons or surveillance devices, and the station's AI had been temporarily shut down to prevent possible human infiltration. Paranoid much, came a familiar voice from behind them. The delegation turned to see Captain Sarah Chun walking casually down the corridor, flanked by 2 humans in what appeared to be formal diplomatic attire. Her uniform was pristine, her bearing confident, and her expression suggested she found their security measures mildly amusing. "Captain Chun," Mirataith said carefully, "you weren't scheduled to arrive for another hour." "We've been here for 6 hours," Chun replied. "We wanted time to scan the station and ensure there weren't any unpleasant surprises waiting for us. Old habits from 3,000 years of assuming everyone wants to kill us." She gestured to her companions. "Allow me to introduce Dr. Marcus Webb, our chief historian and cultural analyst, and Ambassador Elena Vasquez, who will be handling the formal negotiations. They've both been looking forward to meeting the people who inherited the galaxy we left behind." Dr. Webb, a man with graying hair and intense green eyes, stepped forward. High Chancellor, I've studied your species' diplomatic records extensively. Your people's evolution from predatory pack hunters to sophisticated negotiators is one of the most fascinating cultural developments we've observed. The casual mention of detailed knowledge about Cerealian evolution sent a chill through the Confederation delegates. How much did the humans really know about each of their species? Ambassador Vasquez, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked black hair, smiled politely. Shall we proceed to the negotiation chamber? I understand we have representatives from several concerned parties waiting. The formal conference room was a testament to neutral design, with seating arrangements that accommodated the vast physiological differences between galactic species. The Confederation delegation took their positions around the curved table, while the three humans sat across from them with an ease that suggested they owned the room. Before we begin formal negotiations, Chun said, we need to address the elephant in the room. Or should I say, the Zephyrian War Fleet currently massing at the edge of this system. Ambassador Velkoth, who had been conspicuously silent during the introductions, finally spoke. The Empire maintains the right to position our forces anywhere in neutral space. We're simply ensuring that these negotiations are conducted without external interference. Dr. Webb consulted a tablet that seemed to be made of solid light. 47 heavy cruisers, 12 dreadnoughts, and 1 command carrier. That's a significant investment in ensuring non-interference. Tell me, Ambassador, is this the same fleet composition your ancestors used for the Altarian preliminary bombardment operations? The specificity of the information hit like a physical blow. Velkoth's scales rippled with agitation. How could you possibly know our fleet compositions? Because we've been watching your military exercises for 73 years, Webb replied calmly. Every tactical simulation, every fleet movement, every strategic planning session. We know your doctrine better than most of your own officers. Chun activated a holographic display that showed the space around Centauri Station in real time. The Zephyrian fleet was indeed positioned at the system's edge, their weapons powered down, but clearly ready for immediate action. What you can't see, Chun continued, is the human fleet currently sharing the same space. The display shifted, and suddenly, the space around the Zephyrian vessels was filled with human ships. They had been invisible to every sensor, hidden by technology that made their presence undetectable even when they were close enough to touch. 47 heavy cruisers versus 47 of our destroyers, Chun said conversationally. 12 dreadnoughts versus 12 of our light cruisers. 1 command carrier versus. She smiled. Well, let's just say we brought something special for that one. Ambassador Velkoth stared at the display in shock. His species' most advanced sensors should have detected something, anything, yet the human ships appear to have been operating in perfect stealth only kilometers away from his fleet. This is impossible, he whispered. Actually, it's just advanced engineering, Ambassador Vasquez said. One of the advantages of having 3,000 years to develop technology without anyone shooting at you. We've made remarkable progress in material science, energy manipulation, and what you might call applied physics. High Chancellor Mirate found her voice. Captain Chun, are you threatening us? Not at all, Chun replied. We're demonstrating capability. There's a difference. A threat would be if I told you what our weapons could do to that Zephyrian fleet. A demonstration is simply showing you that we can engage them without their sensors ever detecting our ships. She gestured, and the display shifted again. Now it showed detailed schematics of Zephyrian vessel designs, complete with structural weak points, weapon specifications, and tactical assessments. The Zephyrian Empire has built their entire military strategy around overwhelming firepower and superior numbers, Dr. Webb explained. It's a doctrine that served them well against species that fought conventional warfare. However, we don't fight conventional warfare. What do you want? Velkoth demanded. Ambassador Vasquez opened a case that contained what appeared to be crystalline data storage devices. She placed them on the table with careful precision. We want justice, she said simply. For 3,000 years, The galaxy has operated under the assumption that genocide is an acceptable solution to inconvenient neighbors. We're here to change that assumption. She activated the first crystal, and the room filled with holographic documents. Treaties, communications, military orders, and historical records from the human war. But these weren't the sanitized versions found in public databases. These were the complete, unedited records that showed the true scope of what had been done. The destruction of humanity wasn't a military necessity, Vasquez continued. It wasn't even a response to human aggression. It was a calculated decision by the Zephyrian Empire to claim human territory and resources justified by propaganda that painted humans as a genetic threat to galactic stability. The records showed Zephyrian planning sessions where officials discussed the most efficient methods for exterminating human populations. They included communications between Imperial commanders and civilian administrators about dividing human worlds among allied species. Most damning were the scientific studies that proved human genetic diversity actually strengthened galactic gene pools, directly contradicting the official justification for the genocide. These records show that the Zephyrian Empire knew their official reasons for attacking humanity were false, Dr. Webb said. They proceeded anyway because they wanted our territory and saw an opportunity to eliminate a potential rival. This is ancient history, Velkoth protested, though his voice lacked conviction. History that's repeating itself, Chen replied. She activated another crystal, showing current Zephyrian internal communications about the Altarian situation. The language was identical, the justifications the same, even the administrative procedures for post-genocide territorial division. 6 species currently marked for optimization, Vasquez said. The same term your ancestors used for humanity. The same bureaucratic processes, the same military preparations, the same propaganda campaigns to justify what's coming. Lisa R.A., the Altarian representative, spoke for the first time since entering the room. What are you proposing? A new galactic order, Vasquez replied. One where genocide is not just discouraged, but actively prevented. We're proposing the establishment of the Galactic Protection Accord, a treaty that recognizes the right of all sapient species to exist without threat of extermination. She activated a third crystal, showing the framework of a comprehensive legal structure. International courts with enforcement powers, protection protocols for threatened species, and, most significantly, a mutual defense agreement backed by human military technology. Any species that signs this accord will be protected against genocidal aggression, Chen explained. In exchange, they agree to never engage in such aggression themselves and to support protective actions when other species are threatened. And what gives you the right to impose this new order? Velkoth demanded. Chen stood up, her movement causing the human ships on the display to shift into attack formations around their Zephyrian counterparts. The same right your ancestors claimed when they tried to wipe us out, superior force. The difference is we're offering you a choice. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans weren't just proposing a new treaty. They were offering to become the galactic police force, using their technological superiority to prevent future genocides. What happens to species that don't sign? Mirataith asked. They're free to continue their current behavior, Vasquez replied. But they do so without the protection the Accord provides. And if they engage in genocidal actions against Accord members. She gestured to the display showing human ships surrounding the Zephyrian fleet. Well, let's just say we have a very long memory and a strong sense of justice. Dr. Webb leaned forward. High Chancellor, we've spent 3,000 years studying galactic civilization. We've seen the cycles of expansion and conquest, the rise and fall of species, the constant struggle for resources and territory. We've concluded that the galaxy needs a stabilizing force, something to prevent the strong from simply exterminating the weak. And you decided to be that force? Mirataith asked. We've decided to try, Chen replied, because the alternative is watching the galaxy repeat the same mistakes that nearly destroyed us. We won't allow another species to experience what humanity experienced. She gestured to the Zephyrian fleet on the display. Ambassador Velkoth, you have a decision to make. Your empire can join the new order we're proposing, accepting limitations on your expansion in exchange for protection and technological advancement. Or you can oppose us and discover exactly what 3,000 years of focused military development looks like in practice. The Zephyrian ambassador stared at the display, watching human ships that could destroy his fleet without being detected position themselves around vessels that had dominated galactic space for millennia. You're demanding the end of the Zephyrian Empire, he said quietly. We're demanding the end of imperial genocide, Vasquez corrected. Your empire can continue to exist and prosper. It simply can't continue to exist by exterminating other species. That part of galactic history ends today. The negotiation chamber fell silent as each representative contemplated a galaxy where humanity had returned not as refugees or suppliants, but as the dominant power offering a new way forward. The cost of galactic pride was becoming clear. Adapt to humanity's vision of justice, or face the consequences of opposing a species that had spent 3 millennia preparing for this moment. The choice was theirs, but the outcome was increasingly obvious. Humanity had returned, and the galaxy would never be the same. The emergency recess had lasted 3 hours, during which the various delegations had engaged in frantic communications with their home governments. Ambassador Velkoth stood at the observation deck of Centauri Station, staring out at space that appeared empty, but which he now knew contained enough human firepower to reduce his fleet to cosmic dust without warning. His personal communicator chimed with an encrypted message from the Imperial High Command on Zephyria Prime. The contents were brief and devastating. Yield to human demands. Full compliance authorized. Empire survival takes precedence. The message represented the complete collapse of 3,000 years of Zephyrian supremacy. Intelligence reports flooding in from across the Empire painted a picture of total human surveillance and overwhelming technological superiority. Every military base, every fleet movement, every classified research facility had been under observation for decades. More terrifying was the realization that humanity could have struck at any time, but had chosen to wait. When the negotiations resumed, the atmosphere in the chamber had changed completely. The human delegation sat with the calm confidence of those who held all the cards, while the galactic representatives looked like beings who had just discovered their entire understanding of reality was wrong. Before we continue, Captain Shin said, I think it's important that everyone understands exactly what humanity has become during our 3,000-year absence from galactic affairs. She activated a new holographic display that showed human space in its true scope. Instead of the small refugee colonies the galaxy might have imagined, the display revealed a civilization that spanned hundreds of star systems across the galactic rim, with a population that numbered in the hundreds of billions. While you've been managing the politics of 47 species in the galactic core, Chun continued, we've been building something unprecedented. A unified human civilization with resources that dwarf any single galactic power and technology that makes your current science look primitive. Dr. Webb stood and gestured to specific systems on the display. We've established industrial worlds that can manufacture starships in weeks rather than years. Research stations that have unlocked the fundamental forces of the universe. Agricultural worlds that can feed entire star systems. And military installations that, he paused, glancing at the pale faces around the table, that exist solely to ensure no one ever tries to exterminate humanity again. Ambassador Vasquez took over the presentation. But technology alone doesn't make a civilization. What makes us different from the species that try to destroy us is that we've learned to think beyond immediate gain and territorial expansion. She activated a new section of the display showing human worlds in detail. Cities that floated in harmony with natural ecosystems, orbital habitats that existed in perfect balance with stellar mechanics, resource extraction that enhanced rather than depleted planetary environments. We've had 3,000 years to ask ourselves a fundamental question, Vasquez continued. What kind of species do we want to be? Do we want to repeat the same cycles of conquest and domination that led to our exile, or do we want to create something better? High Chancellor Mirataith leaned forward. And what answer did you reach? That the galaxy needs shepherds, not predators, Chen replied. For too long, galactic civilization has operated under the principle that might makes right. Strong species expand until they encounter stronger species, then either submit or are destroyed. The cycle continues endlessly, with genocide as the ultimate expression of imperial power. She gestured to Ambassador Velkoth. The Zephyrian Empire represents the logical endpoint of this thinking. They've become so efficient at extermination that they've turned genocide into administrative policy. What they did to us, they've done to 11 other species in the past 3 millennia. What they're planning for the Altarians and 5 other species is simply the next iteration of the same process. But this cycle can be broken, Dr. Webb said. What we're proposing isn't human domination over galactic affairs. It's human protection of galactic diversity. We want to create a system where species can develop according to their own nature without fear of extermination by more aggressive neighbors. Ambassador Vasquez activated another crystal, showing detailed schematics of the proposed Galactic Protection Accord. This isn't a treaty between equals, she said bluntly. We're not pretending that humanity doesn't now possess overwhelming advantages in technology and military capability. This is a compact where humanity uses its advantages to protect species that would otherwise be vulnerable to imperial aggression. In essence, Chen added, we're offering to become the galactic immune system, a force that activates when genocidal aggression threatens sapient life, but remains dormant during normal political and economic competition. Lisa R.A., the Altarian representative, spoke first. What would this protection involve specifically? For species currently targeted by the Zephyrian Empire, immediate intervention, Vasquez replied. Human fleets will take positions around threatened worlds. Zephyrian forces will withdraw to pre-expansion boundaries. Any attempt to resume aggressive actions will be met with overwhelming force. And for the Zephyrian Empire? Velkoth asked, his voice tight with suppressed anger. Transformation or isolation, Chen said simply. Your empire has a choice. Abandon the practice of genocidal expansion and join the new galactic order, or be quarantined to your current territory until your civilization evolves beyond its current destructive phase. She activated a display showing Zephyrian space surrounded by human sensor networks and patrol fleets. We're prepared to enforce a containment field around the entire empire, if necessary. No Zephyrian ship will be able to leave Imperial space without human permission. Trade would be limited to essential supplies. Your civilization would have all the time it needs to decide whether genocide is really worth complete isolation from galactic society. The threat was delivered with calm professionalism, but its implications were staggering. Humanity was offering to cage the most powerful military force in the galaxy, as if they were dangerous animals. This is madness, Velkoth whispered. You're talking about controlling the entire galaxy. We're talking about protecting it, Dr. Webb corrected. There's a difference between control and guardianship. We don't want to rule galactic civilization. We want to ensure it survives long enough to mature beyond its current adolescent phase. He gestured to historical data showing the rise and fall of galactic empires over the past 10 millennia. Every dominant species in galactic history has eventually overextended itself through aggressive expansion, then collapsed when it encountered effective resistance. The pattern is always the same: growth through conquest, resource depletion through war, internal instability from managing conquered populations, and final collapse when military costs exceed economic capacity. The Zephyrian Empire is currently in the late expansion phase, Chen added. Continuing on their current path will lead to inevitable collapse within 2 to 3 centuries. But that collapse will take dozens of other species with them. We're offering an alternative. Ambassador Vasquez activated the final section of their presentation. The Galactic Protection Accord creates a stable framework for long-term development. Species are free to compete economically, explore territory beyond their current borders, and develop according to their cultural preferences. The only restriction is on genocidal aggression. And who determines what constitutes genocidal aggression? Mirataith asked. Initially, we do, Chen replied honestly. Humanity will serve as the enforcement mechanism for the first century while the Accord establishes itself. After that, enforcement responsibilities will be gradually transferred to a galactic authority composed of all member species. A century of human control over galactic affairs. Velkoth said. A century of human protection for galactic affairs, Vasquez corrected. During which time, species like yours can either learn to coexist with their neighbors or remain isolated until they do. The chamber fell silent as the full scope of humanity's proposal became clear. They weren't just offering to prevent the current Zephyrian expansion. They were offering to reshape the entire basis of galactic civilization, creating a protective framework that would prevent future genocides while allowing normal development to continue. I need to know something, Mirataith said quietly. If we accept this accord, if we allow humanity to become the guardians of galactic civilization, what guarantee do we have that you won't eventually become the same kind of imperial power you're trying to stop? Chen leaned back in her chair, considering the question carefully. You don't, she said finally. We can't prove that humanity will never abuse this power, because absolute proof doesn't exist. What we can offer is our track record. Dr. Webb activated a display showing human internal development over the past 3 millennia. During our exile, we had countless opportunities to become conquerors. We could have attacked vulnerable species, established our own empire through force, or used our technological advantages for territorial expansion. Instead, we chose to build a sustainable civilization focused on scientific advancement and cultural development. More importantly, Chun continued, we're not asking you to trust us forever. The Accord includes specific provisions for transitioning enforcement authority to galactic institutions as they develop the capability to handle it. Our goal is to work ourselves out of a job, not to establish a permanent human hegemony. And if we refuse? Velkoth asked. Chen's expression grew cold. Then you continue with your planned genocide against the Altarians and 5 other species, and we stop you by force. The difference is, without the Accord, there's no framework for future cooperation. You become our enemies rather than our partners in creating a better galaxy. She gestured to the display showing the human fleet surrounding the Zephyrian vessels. Ambassador, your empire built its power on the foundation of human extinction. You've had 3,000 years to enjoy the benefits of that genocide. The time has come to pay the price for that choice. We're offering you the chance to pay that price through cooperation rather than conflict, Vasquez added. Help us build a galaxy where genocide never happens again, and your people can be part of the future we're creating. Refuse, and you'll discover what humanity learned 3,000 years ago. Sometimes the price of survival is everything you thought you were. The ultimatum hung in the air like a sword waiting to fall. Humanity had returned not as the species that had been driven from the galaxy, but as its potential saviors or destroyers. The choice of which they became lay entirely in the hands of the civilizations that had thought themselves safe in their assumption of human extinction. The cost of galactic pride was becoming a bill that demanded immediate payment, with interest calculated in the currency of justice delayed for 3 millennia. And humanity was no longer willing to extend the payment terms. 6 months after the Centauri negotiations, the galaxy was a fundamentally different place. High Chancellor Mirataith stood in her private office aboard the new Galactic Protection Authority station, watching through reinforced viewports as human and Confederation ships conducted joint patrols of the Altarian system. It still felt surreal to see the 2 fleets working together after millennia of assuming humanity was extinct. The transformation had not been gentle. 3 Zephyrian battle groups had attempted to test human resolve by attacking outlying Altarian mining stations. The engagements had lasted less than 30 minutes each, ending with entire Zephyrian fleets disabled by weapons that seemed to rewrite the laws of physics. Not a single Zephyrian ship had been destroyed, but all had been left completely powerless, their crews forced to send distress calls to the very people they had been trying to attack. The humans are quite serious about their no casualties unless necessary policy, her aide, Colonel Threnix, observed as he entered with the day's intelligence reports. They've perfected the art of making military force humane. Mirataith accepted the reports with a mixture of admiration and unease. Humanity's demonstration of restraint had been as terrifying as their demonstration of capability. To disable enemy fleets without loss of life required such overwhelming technological superiority that resistance became literally meaningless. "Any word from the Zephyrian delegation?" she asked. "Ambassador Velkoth's transport arrived this morning," Threnix replied. "He's requested a private meeting before the formal session. Apparently, the Empire has reached a decision about the accord. The past 6 months have been a time of intense internal debate within the Zephyrian Empire. Faction after faction had risen and fallen as the reality of humanity's return sank in. Military hardliners who advocated resistance have been quietly removed from power after intelligence assessments showed that human fleets could reduce Zephyrian space to uninhabitable rubble within weeks. Economic leaders who calculated the cost of eternal containment had gradually gained influence, pushing for accommodation with a new galactic order. When Ambassador Velkoth entered her office an hour later, Mirataith was struck by how much the Zephyrian had changed. The arrogant confidence that had characterized their previous interactions had been replaced by the careful demeanor of someone who had seen his entire worldview shattered. "High Chancellor," Velkoth said, his serpentine form moving with less fluid grace than before, "I come bearing the formal response of the Zephyrian Imperial Council to humanity's proposal." He placed a crystalline data storage device on her desk with a reverence typically reserved for sacred artifacts. "The Empire formally requests admission to the Galactic Protection Accord, with full acceptance of all terms and conditions outlined by the human delegation." Mirataith stared at the crystal. 6 months ago, the idea of the mighty Zephyrian Empire submitting to any external authority would have been unthinkable. The implications were staggering. The most powerful military force in the galaxy was surrendering its right to expand through conquest. "The Imperial Council was unanimous?" she asked. "Eventually," Velkoth replied. "After we received the human intelligence package detailing exactly how many of our classified operations they had been monitoring. When we realized they had recordings of private Imperial Council sessions from the past 70 years, unanimity became considerably easier to achieve." He activated a small holographic display showing Zephyrian space as it appeared to human sensors. Every base, every ship, every research facility was marked with detailed intelligence assessments. More disturbing were the tactical analyses showing exactly how each installation could be neutralized with minimal effort. "We also received a rather thorough demonstration of human defensive capabilities," Velkoth continued. "When Admiral Kreshmar attempted to conduct what he believed was a secret reconnaissance mission to human space, his entire battle group was intercepted 6 hours into their journey. They were escorted through a complete tour of human military installations, shown weapons tests that violated several laws of physics, and then politely returned to Zephyrian space with detailed recordings of everything they had witnessed. The Admiral's subsequent report convinced even our most stubborn military leaders that resistance was not just futile, but potentially suicidal," Velkoth added with what might have been bitter amusement. "Humanity has spent 3,000 years becoming something that transcends our understanding of military power." Mirataith activated her communication system to contact the human delegation aboard the Defiance. Captain Chen's image appeared almost immediately, as if she had been expecting the call. "High Chancellor," Chun said with a slight smile. I take it Ambassador Velkoth has delivered his empire's decision. The Zephyrian Empire formally requests admission to the Galactic Protection Accord. Mirataith confirmed, with full acceptance of all terms. Excellent, Chen replied. Dr. Webb has prepared a comprehensive integration plan for Zephyrian forces. The transition will begin immediately with the withdrawal of all Imperial forces from contested territories. Ambassador Vasquez will coordinate with Zephyrian leadership to establish new territorial boundaries that respect the sovereignty of previously targeted species. She paused, her expression growing more serious. However, there will be conditions for Zephyrian admission beyond simple territorial withdrawal. The Empire will need to demonstrate genuine commitment to the Accord's principles through specific actions. Velkoth shifted uncomfortably. What kind of actions? Reparations, Chun said simply. Not just to the species you are currently threatening, but to the civilizations your empire has destroyed over the past 3 millennia. We have detailed records of 11 species that were completely eliminated by Zephyrian expansion. Their former territories will be established as memorial preserves, maintained by the Empire as acknowledgement of the cost of their imperial policies. The demand hit like a physical blow. Acknowledging previous genocides meant accepting legal and moral responsibility for actions the Empire had always justified as necessary expansion. Additionally, Chen continued, the Empire will participate in the Galactic Reconciliation Project. Human historians have compiled complete records of Imperial communications, military orders, and policy decisions during every major expansion campaign. These records will be made public, along with testimonies from survivors and their descendants. You're asking us to confess to war crimes, Velkoth whispered. We're asking you to acknowledge the truth. Dr. Webb's voice came through the communication system. The galaxy has spent 3,000 years operating under sanitized versions of Imperial expansion that minimize the reality of what was done to conquered species. That ends now. Chen leaned forward. Ambassador, the choice is simple. Join the new galactic order with full acknowledgement of past actions and commitment to preventing their repetition, or remain isolated until your civilization evolves beyond its current phase. There is no middle ground. Velkoth stared at the communication display for several long moments. Mirataith could see the internal struggle playing out across his reptilian features, the ingrained imperial pride warring with the practical necessity of survival in a galaxy where humanity held absolute advantage. The Empire accepts all conditions, he said finally. We will acknowledge our historical actions and participate in the reconciliation process. Then, welcome to the Galactic Protection Accord, Chen said warmly. Dr. Webb will begin working with your historians immediately to prepare the historical documentation. Ambassador Vasquez will coordinate with your military leadership to establish the new territorial framework. And I'll be working directly with your Imperial Council to develop integration protocols for Zephyrian forces within the new galactic defense structure. She paused, and her expression grew unexpectedly gentle. Ambassador, I know this is difficult. Your people aren't inherently evil. They're simply the product of a system that rewarded genocidal expansion for so long that it became normal. But systems can change, and so can the species that create them. 3,000 years ago, Chun continued, humanity was also a species that solved problems through violence and territorial expansion. Our exile forced us to find better ways to exist in the universe. Now we're offering the galaxy the chance to evolve beyond the same destructive patterns that nearly destroyed us. The communication ended, leaving Velkoth and Mirataith alone with the magnitude of what had just occurred. The Zephyrian Empire, the dominant force in galactic politics for 3 millennia, had just submitted completely to the authority of a species they had tried to exterminate. What happens now? Velkoth asked quietly. Now we learn to live in a galaxy where genocide is no longer an option, Mirataith replied. Where species are protected rather than consumed, where conflicts are resolved through negotiation backed by overwhelming force dedicated to preservation rather than destruction. She gestured toward the viewport, where human and Confederation ships continued their joint patrols. Humanity isn't just offering protection from Imperial aggression. They're offering an alternative to the entire cycle of expansion and conquest that has dominated galactic civilization since the first species learned to travel between stars. Over the following weeks, the transformation accelerated. Zephyrian forces withdrew from occupied territories under human supervision, their movements monitored by invisible fleets that ensured compliance without humiliation. The 6 species that had been marked for extermination began rebuilding their civilizations under the protection of human defensive networks. Most significantly, other aggressive empires throughout the galaxy began requesting information about joining the Accord rather than risking confrontation with humanity's demonstrated capabilities. Dr. Webb's historical research teams worked with species across the galaxy to document the true scope of Imperial expansion and its costs. The records they compiled painted a picture of systematic extermination that dwarfed anything in public galactic databases. Hundreds of species had been eliminated over the millennia, their existence erased so completely that most galactic citizens had never known they existed. But alongside the documentation of past horrors came evidence of humanity's vision for the future. Human technology was selectively shared to help developing species defend themselves. Human agricultural techniques were distributed to prevent resource conflicts. Human mediation protocols were established to resolve disputes before they escalated to warfare. 6 months after the Centauri negotiations, Ambassador Velkoth stood in the memorial preserve that had once been Rigel 7, homeworld of the extinct Rigellan Confederation. The planet had been beautiful once before Zephyrian bombardment had reduced it to ash and radioactive waste. Now, human terraforming technology was slowly restoring its biosphere, while Zephyrian workers, supervised by human engineers, built monuments to the civilization they had destroyed. "The irony is not lost on me," he said to the human coordinator overseeing the project, "that we're using the wealth gained from genocidal expansion to memorialize our victims." "Justice often involves irony," the human replied. "But what matters is that it eventually arrives. Your people are learning to build rather than destroy, to preserve rather than consume. That's a transformation worth celebrating, even if it came 3,000 years later than it should have." As Velkoth watched Zephyrian soldiers carefully planting trees that would grow for centuries in soil they had once poisoned with weapons, he understood that the galaxy had indeed changed forever. The cost of galactic pride had finally been calculated and paid, not in the currency of revenge that many had expected, but in the harder currency of truth, acknowledgement, and the commitment to ensure that such costs would never need to be paid again. Humanity had returned to claim their place in galactic civilization, but they had not returned as conquerors. They had returned as teachers, protectors, and guardians of a future where the strong protected the weak rather than consuming them. It was a lesson the galaxy was finally ready to learn 3 millennia after it should have been obvious. The age of imperial genocide was over. The age of galactic protection had begun, and humanity, forged in the fire of their own near extinction, had become the guardians of a galaxy that was finally growing beyond its violent adolescence into something worthy of the stars themselves.